In this lesson, I would like to talk about APIs, which stands for Application Programming Interface. It's a way of telling a computer how to talk to another computer in a way. And in our case, it's most likely us with our cables patch talking to external servers. So we've seen how to, in previous lesson, how to download images or videos or 3D models, but what if we want to download or send data, just random data, to a server? Then to do this, we will need to talk to an API of a server and use the right words, the right verbs, and the right basically interface to talk to it. So the most common use case we have in the web is using what we call the REST interface. And instead of rehashing what was already online, I decided that it would be nice to actually ask ChatGPT to give us a definition of what REST is. And I said, okay, what is a REST API? Give me a perspective as a learner of JavaScript and interactive web dev. So, and it says, in essence, you can read, but it's a rule of convention, and this is important because there's not a specific protocol. It's a convention that all developers try to adhere to, but of course it depends on how you as a developer feel like developing your API basically. And the core concept works by first it's using the HTTP protocol, which is most of what you have on the web. All the URLs are either HTTP or HTTPS, most likely HTTPS now. And you have a resource, so there's something that you can name, manipulate it, or transferred. And if you look at all the URLs, most likely you have a logical way of understanding how it's composed. So imagine this OpenAI API. I can share here. So the verb is share. And then I have an ID because I want to share this conversation. If I go back to Cables, I have Cables, I have a verb here, or a noun, but here it's a verb, edit, and then I have the ID of the patch. If I want to just view this patch, this will change to /view/the ID. If you go on YouTube, it's always the same thing. So the goal here is to have some kind of a noun, a resource you want to access, and so you have to put like the path. Basically, it's called a route or an endpoint, and you append some kind of ID or data you want to push to. It's stateless. This is also important. It means that the server doesn't. You need to send all the requested information to the server for it to know that it's really you talking. So imagine that you log into a website. Then if you want to access some resources that are protected, you will need to send alongside your request some kind of authentication. Generally, it's a session cookie or some kind of a token, like JSON token that the server gave you when you first logged in, and then you have to append this to all subsequent requests. So you can read more of this. This we will talk when we really go into developing and talk about the code itself. But yeah, the cool thing about knowing about REST, APIs in general and REST APIs is that, as I said, most of the web works like this, and we exchange JSON or XML, but most likely JSON as a standard format to send and receive information. So how does it look in practice? Well, we can go back, and as we know, we don't need to code because we are in the cables realm, and there is an op for that. So the op is called AJAX request. And I just want to give you a bit of historical background. Why is it called AJAX request and not just fetch, for instance, which is a new API HTML5 gives us? Because AJAX is historical. It's in the web 2.0 around 2004 and 2006. Remember that before, maybe not because you're too young, but the web was very slow, and each time you had to make a request and you wanted to change something on the page, you had to reload the page. It was horrible as an experience. And so the developers found a way to replace part of the web page by without having to reload. So this is where asynchronous JavaScript and XML, AJAX, request stands for. And why are we talking about XML? Because HTML is a subset of XML. So all HTML pages are XML, but the other way is not true. So you wanted to replace literally part of the page asynchronously, and so that it will look like the page was refreshing without having to reload all the assets and everything on the page. So this is where the AJAX requests come from. If you want to just understand a bit more about HTML in general, you can do this on any web page. You can just go here, click, setting, more tools, developer tools, and here you have elements. So this is actually the page here, and you can even click and to select an element on the page, and it will go in the HTML markup here and highlight, okay, this is a canvas. So if you think about this, the Cables editor is almost like a patch itself, because this is using also WebGL, by the way, to render. So this is this element. If I wanted to swap this element on the fly without having to reload all the page, I could, and I would use an AJAX request. Right, so this is where it comes from, to be able to replace part of the markup, the XML markup here. But now we use it to mostly get and send JSON information. So this is why, if you click on the AJAX request here on the right panel, you would see by default that the content type that you expect is of type JSON, and it's also selected the parse JSON and auto request, which will be will uncheck, so that I want to trigger the request manually for now. Okay, so I'm saving, and now, okay, the first thing that we need to check here is what is the HTTP method. So how are we gonna get or post or put some data? And I didn't talk about this yet, but if you go here, the HTTP method, you have basically you have more than this, but most likely 90% of all cases is either you get data or you post stuff. Post is to create, but some also use put or post. To be honest, it's completely up to how the server expects the data to be. It doesn't matter for the server, it's how but it's just as a convention we use get to retrieve data, and usually you put data in the URL itself. So when everything you do with a get is exactly like here, for instance, we're going to talk about this example. I'm saying here, hey, this is my URL and I'm getting page 2, but if I put page 1, then something changes, right? So to do this kind of request, I made a get request. Now, if I want to push information to the server, I would do a post request, or a put if you want to update, but this will never work because no one wants to allow you to basically delete stuff directly on their server, right? So it would be a very big security breach. So maybe you didn't know this, but if you want to, even when you delete your profile on whatever website, usually what they do is they mark your profile as deleted, and it's being deleted after X days, or like when another basically program goes over all the database and actually needs to delete, if they adhere to the GDPR, which is not necessarily true. But we never delete something from the main database just like this, because if I want to recover my account, if I get hacked, then I would delete all the database, and would be very bad in terms of security. So in most cases you would get or post. So as I was mentioning here, we want to try this in API. So I found this very cool website called REST, which is basically a free hosted API. It gives us random values, but they still implement all of this endpoints basically for us to test. So the first thing we could do is to get one user. It's exactly what I've been doing here. This was all users, but if I only want to get one user, I know I need to put the root URL here and happen /API/users and then the ID of my user. So how do we do this in Cables? Well, it's simple. What I would do first is to create a string to host my root URL, because I know that all my requests after that are always going to start with the same server, basically. Okay? I know that it's also /API. So to actually get the API, I need to happen this at the end. Now we know how to make variables, so I can create one and call this root URL, for instance, and save my patch. So now if I need to make different AJAX requests, I can use the variable here. So as I said before, we want to get a single user. So I need to concatenate a string, right? I need to recreate whatever I see here. So if I want to do user/2, this is what I want to recreate, but instead of me typing it in my bar here, I want to do this from cables. So I'm here, and I know that I need to concatenate a string. So I'm gonna put this first. Now I know new string, it's not supposed to be a new string, it's supposed to be the URL. So maybe I need to refresh the page. Let's try again. Okay, yeah, works. Now I need to do /user/2, right? But if I want to make this, for instance, and be able to browse different users, maybe I need to put the other part of the ID part as a variable that I could play with. So how do I do this? We know we've seen this before. Instead of having one concat, if I want to make multiple concatenation, I can use this concat multi. So I can go here, put this in string 0. Now put /user, and then this one, the slash, and now the string 2 would be this one would be the number I want to. So I can put a sidebar, put a simple slider, and now the slider has to be an integer, right? Let's say between 0 and 4, and I'm stepping, the default is 0, set my default, and then I'm going to call this user ID, and now I'm going to transform this number to string, and now I'm going to concatenate this here. So when I move the slider, let's visualize simply what's happening here. You see, I'm changing the URL, and now I need to pass this as input for my AJAX request, saving, and then I'm expecting the result to be JSON, because I know it from just looking at whatever they gave us here, and also by inspecting that it looks like a JSON thing here. And now if I trigger the request, so I can trigger by making a button as well. And I'm gonna call this fetch, and connecting here. So now when it's good practice to align everything under the sidebar like this. Now I can view the output with the viz object. So for now, nothing happened. I'm saving the patch. Now I'm clicking, and I'm fetching data from the server. So it works. And if I change the user ID and I fetch again, I'm changing and putting data from the web, a different color, different anything that the server gives us. So already we made our first request, and it was pretty easy. So notice something I want you to notice, that we didn't use any main loop, right? This HTML and HTTP request has nothing to do with WebGL. Cables is a platform that allows us to mix different technologies, all belonging, of course, to the web technology. But the web, as I mentioned before, is just not only one thing. You have the HTML, all the DOM manipulation, how you create buttons and paragraphs and so forth. You have the CSS, which is how you style element to change the colors, the background, the fonts. Then you have the canvas, which is how you can draw in either in 2D or 3D. And the WebGL is an API to basically convert things from 3D to an image. And all of this live together in one coherent framework. So we don't need a main loop for now, and you could technically process some data, do some computation with the cables up, send the result to another server, and you will never have to use the main loop. So it also works. It's uncommon, not very practical, but it could work. So if we go back now to our patch, let's try to send some data. So now for now we get, right, we fetch some data from the server, but they also have something about create. So if I go to API/users, but I use a post instead of a get, then I can create something. So let's try this. I'm going to copy and paste my AJAX request. I'm going to change now this to post. I'm posting JSON. I'm also expecting JSON in return. So this is what I will parse in exchange. Now, what is my API? Well, it's the same root URL for sure. Now I can just simply put a concat. I can repeat actually the slash users, but for sake of the exercise, I'm just retyping this. But you notice that this is a post, so I need to actually send data and not just fetching from a URL, right? If I go back here, there is no here slash API slash user 2, but I don't know when I'm creating a user, I don't know which ID I'm gonna get. It's up to the server to give me my ID. So I'm pushing data, posting data, and I'm expecting to get back the same data with an ID. So to send basically the body of my message, when there is a body here, field, and everything has to be put to a string. So if we send JSON, it's fine, but we need to transform it to like an object to a string to be able to send it. Right? So we know we have parse JSON, parse object basically, to transform from a string to an object. So parse object, sorry. But now what we want is the opposite, right? We want to have object stringify or toString, right? To transform it to a string that we can send. So let's imagine here, I'm putting this. So I need to put, I don't know, let's go back. Name job, for instance, right? So name, Kirel, it's my name, okay. Job, I don't know, teacher, okay? That's my, this is the thing I want to send. Now I'm stringifying it, so I'm transforming this to just a string. It looks the same, but now this is a type string and not an object anymore. I'm connecting this to my body. I'm connecting my URL here. And if I click, let's see the result. So if I click, I should be able to get some ID back. Let's see. Okay, so now the server came back to me and said, hey, okay, you've sent some data to me. I've put it in my hypothetical database, and now this is what you get. This is now the new user. So when you create an account on any website, this is how it works, basically with the password and everything. So I hope it makes sense so far. And you see no main loop. We can make many requests like this. So let's try to do something else, another type of request. So we can log in. It's the same thing. This is what I was mentioning. So then let's try this. It's really the same. It's a fake server, right? But it's exactly the same ID. I'm gonna go quickly this time. I'm here. I'm sending some object about username and password, for instance. So username Kirel, password. This doesn't matter. It's a fake server anyways, right? Now I'm stringifying my object. I'm gonna have the same root URL. Now I'm concatenating because I know that I have to do /API/login here, and let's see if it, I mean, technically it should not allow me, right? Because I don't exist. User not found, which is good, right? I don't exist. So technically I would have to register and then log in. But if I take this, the data that they put here as an example, I think was email. I think I was wrong. I should have put email instead of username, but it doesn't matter. Just to illustrate, I get back the token to authenticate incoming requests now to the server. So the way to do this is to basically put in the header of the request, which is another field that you transmit with your content here in the headers, the authorization token, which is this part here. So it's exactly the same. You need to put an object. So it would be something like parse object. Here you have authorization. And then you need to do something like this, bearer space, and then you need to concatenate to it whatever token you got. I was checking online because it depends if it's how also the server does it. It's given by the API, but usually you do this, then you concatenate. So the way to do this would be to compose the object. It would be a bit smarter than the way we do it here, but it doesn't matter. I can go here, get the string itself, concatenate to here the token that we just got. So I go here, get the token, concatenate. Now I have the bearer and the token, and now I need to basically recreate an object with this string. So I can do object, this one is the same object actually, huh? I can do here object set string. So the key is authorization, and the value is here. And now if I visualize the object, yeah, I should get the right token. And now from this is gonna be my header that I'm gonna put to here as input to my AJAX request header. And I can do whatever I want here, but now I will be authenticated basically because I'm transmitting the bearer. So you can also check it out. Once again, ChatGPT is your help, just Stack Overflow as well. It depends on the method you're using to authenticate. But yeah, it looks like this. You have to concatenate and put the string, and then you pass it along. So if you need some kind of, once I'm logged in, you need to like call and basically pretend, I'm not pretend, but being yourself authenticated on the server, you would need some kind of authorization, and this is one way of doing it. Another is also to pass the session as a cookie, but it's a bit out of the scope of the tutorial here. But if you now put the header, everything that you would do would be authenticated, which could be cool for the website if you would say, now I want not to log in, but I want to get a protected resource, for instance. So I hope this part was helpful. But the first thing, of course, when you log in, you get back some kind of token that you need to pass to all the subsequent requests. Cool. So the last thing we could try maybe is to simply explore more about the API. So we have here, when you are here and you get, I think, a list of users. So this is what I was showing at the beginning, users page 2. And once again, if you want to paginate, here everything that happens after the interrogation mark is basically a way to tell the server, okay, I need you to fetch some data, but instead of imagining you have a 1 million user, I'm not gonna request 1 million users. So to optimize for your database load, you usually make pages of, let's say, between 10 and 100 results, and then you let user pages when they click on load more or next, on the infinite scroll, when you go beyond up, it starts to load their next page basically. So this is a way to reduce the load on the server. But if we wanted, we could also integrate this with our slider. It's kind of the same technique in a way. So let's try this. We take the same part, so users here. I'm gonna basically use the same technique that I use with the user ID in a way. But instead of user ID, this will be user ID or page, right? And so I'm gonna copy paste the API. It's the same technique, right? So I think you get the gist of it very quickly. Concatenate. Now I need its users, and then it's API users with the exclamation mark, then page equal. And now I need to concatenate after the value that I put here. I'm just printing the string to make sure that so page 0 doesn't work, right? Because it starts at 1, so that I know that before doing this, so I need to make it 2 routes. I need to add one or make a new slider. I'm just reusing the thing. And now it starts with page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, let's say. Okay. Now I'm putting this here. It's the same technique. And if I click, I'm also gonna fetch here, viewing the result. And now look, it tells me, oh, okay, this is page 1. And I have total of 2 pages and the total number of users. This is very typical of the server. So you know how many buttons to when you go on Google at the bottom and you have the numbers between 1 and 10 or 20, you need to know how many pages am I supposed to being displayed to display. So usually each request to page will give you how many per page and the total number of page. So if I go to 1, then it should work, but then if I go to 3, it should be an error because I'm out of the range. There's basically I'm going too far in the API. So this is not an error, it's just an empty set. But it could also be a 404 saying, hey, or the page, the resource that you want to access does not exist because you asked me to loop through 3 pages of 6 users, but I only have 2. So that's exactly the same technique. And now look, I have some data with people with IDs, emails, and avatars. So if I want to tie to what we did previously, I can simply click here, go on the gear, take the avatar as an array, and now we'll have an array of URLs to images. And now from now we know what to do with them, right? We know that we can display them with the texture array and so texture array loader, for instance, right? And now I know that I can use, now that if I fetch all these images, I can use finally a main loop and start to display things. So just for fun, I just need a main loop, a rectangle, and a basic material, and we should be good to go. I need to just say array get texture, whatever number, so the first one, and voila, I'm here. And I can also paginate if I want to here by adding another in the sidebar here. I can also add another slider, try to organize things a bit, but yeah, you get the gist of it. If I go here and I'm put 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm rotating, and this texture is not square, so we know the trick now. We have to use the texture info. So it's a good API because there's some images that are not necessarily square. And then we have to use the aspect ratio, which is here, to multiply the width so that depending on the image, we always have the right aspect ratio. So I hope this lesson was informative on how to use APIs. This is the basic. Like when we have an object, then we can go back to the previous lesson about how to parse objects, have data, and call things, and transform visual properties, data into visual properties. And it's not, as you saw, it's not really hard to make a request to an external server in Cables, or to, in our case here, log in or send data, create stuff. So I hope this lesson was informative, and I'll see you in the next one.